to the Florida City and County Management Association's webinar entitled Leading Through Crisis. My name is Bob Lee, and I have the honor of serving as your host today. Joining me as co-host is Dr. Dina Hurst and Mr. Mike Ryko. Dina and Mike both work with the John Scott Daly Florida Institute of Government and will be the people who will be assisting you, the attendees, most with any technical issues you may have. Dina and Mike will also be assisting me, of course, and our presenter for today with any problems that we may encounter. So if you have any issues, whether it's logging on or throughout the program, and you need to communicate with us, please do so. And I'm going to explain to you in the chat box here how you can do that. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge our sponsors for today. FCCMA, of course, but we also have the Florida League of Cities, the John Scott Daly Florida Institute of Government, the Center for Florida Local Government Excellence. Additionally, we have two corporate sponsors, Strategic Government Resources and Government Services Group. And we thank them all for their support in enabling FCCMA to provide these webinars at no cost to attendees. At this time, I'd like to go back to the Q&A chat box that I referenced earlier and just encourage you, if you look on the right-hand side of your computer page, you'll see a tool there that says chat. And that's where, if you click on that little arrow there, you'll be able to write in your question that you may have for today's presenter, and we'll make sure that the presenter responds to that question. And as we have with past formats for these webinars, we take these questions throughout the webinar. So don't assume that if you ask your question, you'll have to wait until the end. Where appropriate, we'll get those answers to those questions right away. So at this time, I'd like to introduce today's presenter. His name is Jake Johansson, and Jake is the city manager of the city of Port Orange. Jake, welcome. And if you wouldn't mind, please just summarize your background for attendees before you begin, please. Jake, I think you're on mute.
It's a pretty tricky button, that mute button.
There we go.
So thanks, Bob, and thank you as well to the sponsors for today. I'm very happy to see that list of people, and they're very supportive of FCCMA. So thanks a lot. So I'm Jake Johansson. I'm the city manager of the city of Port Orange, down here just about 4 miles south of Florida. I've been here for 4 years, or 5 years now. Prior to that, I was active duty naval officer, spent about 36 years in the Navy. And as you can imagine, I spent a little bit of time, let's just say, in crisis. Some immediate crisis, some long-term crisis. Interestingly enough, I had been through the H1N1 pandemic, and as well as getting shot at and all that other stuff. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to share some of my thoughts and some of my insights into leading in or through crisis. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. I'm looking forward to it. I see the heat is on as my Volusia County city manager team. My friends here are also logging on, and they're probably gonna, first of all, hit me for not hitting the mute button right, or unmute button right away. But I look forward to those comments as we move along. So I'm going to get rid of my ugly mug here and get right to the slides and get started. Hopefully. There we go. So crisis. Crisis can be anything. It can be local. Crisis can be national. It can be Florida, right? We have hurricanes. and it can be national, or in our case with the pandemic, it's global. As far as leadership goes, though, there's 5 things about a crisis that define us, and I'd like to go through those pretty quick. First of all, we got to realize that crisis is common. Crisis. This is not the first time we've had a crisis, right? And during a crisis, people tend to embellish. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to us. I can't believe it. But in truth, that in a crisis, the exaggeration is common. But if you look back to things like Y2K, about the anthrax scare, about SARS, Ebola, the gas crisis, ISIS, which, by the way, they did attack, but we thought they were going to take over the earth, and they didn't quite get there. So people tend to embellish the outcomes of crisis. I would even say that the next election is going to end in crisis, no matter who gets elected, if you ask some people, because they like to embellish. Needless to say, that the world and the nation will go on. So for us as leaders, it's important, very important, to define reality. It's important for us to define reality during the what some consider an intense time of difficulty. Next is crisis is, we're waiting for the slide, it should come up. Crisis is distracting. I'll get to the slide for you. Mike, can you get me to the next one? There's 2 of them. Crisis is distracting. Think about our current situation, news, politicians, anybody that you see on the media, sometimes elected officials, they have an agenda. Sometimes we have an agenda. And they don't always report information in a way that leads you to an educated conclusion. It leads you to the conclusion they want you to end up in. So as leaders, we need to concentrate on our task at hand. Wade through the news, the agendas, and concentrate on the task at hand. For us in a hurricane, it's getting our city open and getting our services to the citizens that need it as soon as possible. In a pandemic, it's protecting our citizens from bad things, no matter what they are, and to keep our services moving forward. Equally as important is we can't let our mind wander. In our current environment, you can't let fear spread faster than the virus. Don't let fear dominate people to the point of paralyzation. How many people have you seen, if you've ever been one of the first to the scene of an accident, how many people jump out and help, and how many people just stop and stop in amazement and don't do anything? You can't be paralyzed by a crisis. So I have a little saying, and I use it a lot at work, but leaders help people get traction in the distraction. Don't let people get distracted. Get them to remain on task. Number 3 is already up. Crisis reveals who we really are. In a crisis, whatever's inside us will really come out. You see that sometimes for us in city management, at a council meeting, during budget time, during a contentious issue, sometimes during rallies or riots or something like that. The true us comes out when we're in crisis. And that is the most important, the important part of being in a crisis is to know who the real you is. So when we come into crisis, we know what we're doing, and we know how we're going to do it, and we react correctly. Because if we don't react correctly, it'll probably not go well for us. So yeah, that you gotta be good at that. All right. I'm gonna go back to get my own slides back. Hold on a second. Mike, I can't get to that.
If you should be able to click back onto the PowerPoint to control it, Jake.
Well, so let me see if it goes. It was delayed last time. Hold on, folks. There we go. I'm back. Number 4, crisis shows our ability to adapt. For those of you around my age, and I'm not going to tell you my age, but you'll know in a minute. Back when I was in high school, there was a great basketball coach, college basketball coach named John Wooden. He wrote a book or two, but he was at UCLA. He was a phenomenal coach. Won back to back. I think he won 7 or 8 national championships in a row. But he would go into a game with a plan. He'd watch the film. He'd go in with a plan. He'd tell his team, this is how we're going to win. And if he wasn't in the lead or happy with his plan at halftime, he'd bring him in. He'd adjust. He'd come up with another plan, or kind of like a branch plan, and go back out and usually win the game. John Wooden had an unbelievable ability, and any coach that can go in at halftime and come out with a win, and you've seen it in every sport, has the unique ability to adapt. Instead of saying, no, we're sticking to our plan, I don't care, we're sticking to the plan, you lose by 28 points. So John Wooden always had a plan. Great leaders have audibles or backup plans for everything they do. When I was in the Navy and war fighting, we called them branch plans. If this happens, then we'll do this. Oftentimes, we'd use the main plan of one war plan and the branch plan of an if statement and a then response from a different if statement. So we mixed and matched as the situation evolved. The more options you can have on the table, the more adaptable you can be. There is, by the way, a profound difference between adaptability, which is new norms, establishing new ways of doing business, and conformity, which is what I said in the first place, which is we're going to stick to this problem. We're going to conform to our original plan. Got to be adaptable. You got to adapt and adjust your way in order to be, in my case, victorious. So crisis is a time when real leaders show up. How many people? Most of us have Facebook accounts or have access to social media. So there's a couple types of people on Facebook, but I want to talk about the two that I see that relate to this subject. I recall when the FFCRA and the CARES Act came out, you had two groups of people. You had one person going, I found this on the internet. Look at this. Here's something from the state of Florida. Here's something from the federal government. There's a webcast, there's a seminar, there's a this, there's a that. And then you got the people going, does anybody know about FFCRA? Does anybody know where I can get money? I'm going to sit here in the dark and you all are going to help me because I can't help myself. Real leaders show up in a time of crisis. Real leaders are the people that are given the answers, that are serving the public in our case, that are serving everybody, getting the information out. You got to have the wherewithal to lead from the front, to be those people, to be the solution to people's problem. And that's obviously what we try to do. You know, in the military, the leader always leads in the battle, but is the last one to eat, right? There's tons of books about it. Apparently we all make our beds too. That's another book. But leading from the front and having the answers is a key point. If you're in the rear and not leading, people will tend to look behind them to see what you're doing, and they'll try to get behind you. So you'll try to get behind them. Next thing you know, you're retreating, and that's not a way to go through a crisis. So as a real leader, we need to be open, we need to be honest, we need to be clear, and we need to be present. Up till recently, I successfully managed the pandemic from work in the office. It is where you need to be. You look at any continuity of government plan that the White House has for the president and the vice president, for this president of the Senate or the majority leader in the Congress. Those people are where they need to be and present. I don't think you'll ever see the president communicate with the public and not have an American flag and the presidential seal behind them. I had the unique experience to work in the White House for a little while, and everywhere we went, we carried the seal of the United States of America. I worked for the vice president, so for the vice president, and an American flag. I had one with me at all times. So no matter what happened, you would be present and it would look like you're in command and control. That is the be present piece. So, and you need to be able to prepare, you need to learn, and you need to take action. Be confident. Uncertainty obviously is a given in crisis. It is okay to change your mind. It's okay to update your opinion on something. What happened 6 months ago when you made a decision, you probably have loads of additional data right now to amend that decision. It's not a flip-flopper. It is definitely the sign of a good leader. And then keep your head above the crowd and above the fray. You cannot get mired down and end up down these rabbit holes on what could possibly happen. You got to stay above the fray. You got to stay above the negative and the positive Facebook posts, which, by the way, folks, I struggle with daily. I have a hard time staying above the fray during any crisis because you want to take it, you want to please everybody. You can't. Stay above it. Think macro. Let your team do their job, and be the person that's thinking strategically. And then because I'm a Navy guy, I'll tell you, there's an old quote that we always used: no sailor ever distinguished himself or herself in smooth seas. We're going to move on to 7 things a leader must be in a crisis. A lot of these have to do with connecting. A lot of these have to do with people. You need to be empathetic. In my opinion, and some people might beg to differ, but in my opinion, leadership is all about the people. It's about our citizens. It's about our team. It's about our elected officials. It's about the people. Some organizations emerge from a crisis a lot stronger and more ready to thrive than they were before the crisis arrived. The big differentiator that separates them from the the others is the people. It's the people that work for you. You need to emphasize. You need to empathize. You need to engage. You need to motivate, and you need to capitalize on the diverse strengths in the face of adversity. And if you don't have diversity in your organization, get there, because the last thing you want is a bunch of yous running around agreeing with everything you said. When it comes to empathy, one of the things that you will see is that anxiety in a crisis is usually high. You need to navigate people's feelings. A crisis is not a good time to bring up the suck it up buttercup mentality. Everybody has feelings. They're different. If you're not a feelings person, you might want to figure out how to put somebody up there that can and take care of that weakness, or figure out how to get a feeling. But the people have feelings, and we got to empathize, and we got to make sure that we that nobody jumps on the freak out train, I call it. Anybody that jumps on the freak out train's headed to a dead end called Calamity City. And I don't want to be the city manager of Calamity City. In Calamity City, by the way, people are powerless to act. And that is not where we want to be, believe me. Second, you need to educate yourself. We kind of touched on this earlier. Don't let the media or politics get in the way of the facts. I don't know how it happens that sometimes for those of us that get calls from the media, a no comment can turn into a quarter-page article. How does that happen? Don't let media or politics get in the way of the facts. If there's something that is a guiding document and you have time, read the whole guiding document, not just the 2 lines that were quoted somewhere, including by your staff or a citizen. Read the entire document. There's context there. There's context there. In the Navy, they used to send out these orders. It would say, in accordance with references A through G, execute the following. It would say, deploy to Japan. And that's all it would say. And people would come up to me and go, well, how do they expect us to do that? I said, well, read reference A through G. And it spells out how to do it. Same thing applies to us in municipal management. We got to read the references. If you don't have time, find a trusted agent in your staff to read the reference all the way through and understand what it says, understand what the interpretation is, and then share that. It's very important. So my advice to you is to read reference A, or the guiding document. So number 3 is be flexible. You got to be flexible. Flexibility, adaptability, it's all the same as far as I'm concerned, but you got to be flexible in order to effectively manage your team. John Wooden, flexible. He had all those branch plans and all those second half ideas. We already talked about not hesitating to change your mind. Change your mind's okay. When COVID first hit, I opened, closed, opened, closed, opened and closed boat ramps about 5 times in a day before I think we finally left them open. And I'll tell you, a lot of that had to do with the data that I was receiving throughout the day. My gut reaction was close it down. by the end of the day, I had more people sharing information with me, including my sister cities in Volusia County. And we all decided that to the best of our ability, we're all going to do the same thing to try to be consistent. We thought that was the most important thing. So don't be afraid to change your mind. Don't be afraid to adapt. And in the flexibility piece, something I'd like you to consider, because I think it allows you to be more flexible, is a thing I call it chair flying, but to kind of tabletop exercise anything you can, right? We tabletop exercise hurricanes, we tabletop exercise train derailments, we tabletop exercise anything that we think could come up in the city. Well, I'll tell you what, we didn't tabletop a pandemic, not like this. But our ability of our staff to be a little bit flexible was due to our tabletops and our thought processes and our relationships we developed. So this chair flying or tabletopping really helps. And for those of you with kids, I have 3 boys. One's in college, 2 in high school right now. And I tell them probably twice or 3 times a week, don't plan for what you expect to happen. Plan for those things that could happen. When you grab your surfboard and you run out into the waves, your thought is, I'm going to ride that big wave in. But what you have to plan for is undertow, shark bite, all that other stuff that could happen to you, and have a plan for that. It'll go a long way to making you successful. So you need to be able to leverage your team as well. That's the 4th one we're going to talk about. I have this thing called opportunity scouts. What's an opportunity scout? I am sure everybody here on the webinar today is either an opportunity scout or has an opportunity scout working with them or for them. I use the term with, but these are people that you just go to get stuff done. And oh, by the way, during a crisis, they come up with some of the most creative and innovative ways to get stuff done legally that you just want to hug them. Deputize your people, those that you know can do it, and those that can't but are up for the challenge, as opportunity scouts. Usually those opportunity scouts offer you a diverse perspective on how to solve problems. You need to tap into your people and get them to understand the current challenges. That's part of the education, right? Get them involved in imagining a response and a recovery. It could be a short-term crisis, it could be a long-term crisis, but get them involved in a recovery plan that creates value in the current environment and even in the future environment. I know that there's a lot of cities that have CARES Act money being made available to them. Yeah, you can solve today's problem of no rent, of utility bills, of flushless toilets, and you know, and hand sanitizer machines. That solves the current problem. But how about looking at things that solve the current problem and a future problem? Going paperless, going remote on permitting, going remote on billing, whatever you're not remote on. There's opportunities there, all within the law, obviously. I wouldn't dabble too much in the gray area there, but there's opportunities for the future environment. So in a crisis, these opportunity scouts especially, their aperture for imagination opens up. And they often see more opportunity than a normal day. And when they're engaged in these essential threats, that they kind of rise to the occasion. They'll come up with revenue generation ideas. They'll come up with cost savings ideas that are better than at least me as a 58-year-old guy can come up with. People come up to me all the time with, hey, we could do this. You're like, yeah, I never thought of that. And think about how private sector has, and I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, has pivoted to generate revenue by means that they didn't generate before. And I'm not talking about making masks or making ventilators. I'm talking about these. Look at Zoom. Zoom's actually doing exactly what they were doing before, but they certainly have sped up their productivity and made things available to us that weren't available before, which pushes teams to do the same thing, which makes go-to training more adaptable to what we're doing. It's been phenomenal, not to mention all the other things that people are doing. Many of you are now kind of a little more comfortable with telework because that's what we're doing. Where before, if you're like me, again, another older guy, you're like, yeah, I don't know if I like that. So that kind of, that's from leveraging your team. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? That might work. So communicate judiciously. As leaders, we need to use good judgment and good discernment. We need to, and I mentioned this before, we need to actively define reality. We can't muddy the waters. People are amazingly able to deal with reality, even if it's bad news. It's the unknown that's paralyzing. I tell people all the time to set, even in a non-crisis environment, set the expectation. Let people know it's coming, and they will adapt accordingly. They might share with you they don't like it, but they'll conform and they'll be part of the solution. Our job as the leaders is to explain the facts. And how do we have the facts? Remember education, read the reference, be truthful about that. Let's say things like job security and wage security. If there's no guarantees, say something. Uncertainty and ambiguity can be more harmful than the truth. So be upfront, let them know what the score is, which is important. You got to communicate the score. Everyone wants to know how they're doing. So the first thing you got to do is set new targets, right? There's a new starting line and new targets. You know, forget about that. We're over here now. Keep tabs on those new targets. We did this, we did that, we did this, we did that. We need to balance the tension between what is real and what is possible. So keep your eye on what is possible, and with your opportunity agents, with your folks that you rely on all the time, get them to leap forward in the what is possible. And then I think it's important to highlight these rays of light, these nuggets, as we call them on the staff, these wins. You got to highlight those. What's going right? Everybody will tell you what's going wrong. You got to share with them what's going right. Don't harp on the losses. The rays of light are part of the narrative, and we could speak a whole additional hour on the virtues of positive positive thought. Positive mental attitude for you 30 years ago, folks. And then we need to be authentic. I think being authentic is important. I hope I'm a greenleaf kind of servant leader, studier, if you will, but I like being authentic. I think I don't do it because it makes me a better leader. I do it because that's me. But be concerned, be genuinely concerned. If you see somebody out in Walmart, BJ's, or Publix, ask them how they're doing. Be concerned. If your staff looks like they're having problems with teleworking, in our case during the pandemic, ask them how they're doing at home all alone. We all have team members and citizens and people out there carrying a lot of weight on their shoulders, some of which we don't know, at work and at home. Consider your team, consider your citizens and what they're dealing with. The last thing you want to do is be short with somebody, not knowing that they just lost a parent or an animal, or they worked 24 hours and didn't get to see their son's first birthday, or I never missed a birth of a kid, but came close once. Just be concerned. Be vulnerable. That's kind of hard to do for some, but stoicism, being stoic can only get you so far in a crisis. People will think you don't have feelings, that you're not a human. So share wins and losses with emotion, not fake emotion. Tell them how you feel. People need to know that you're human. It's part of trust. And then be confident. Your team, your family, your peers are looking for leaders. Share your confidence and optimism where you can. Ensure your team that together you can get some positive outcomes. You might not solve in this case, the pandemic, but you sure as heck can celebrate some wins. And here's the tough one, folks. Here's the tough one. Manage yourself. It's the hardest thing to do. I tell people about, well, I call it flow, not work-life balance anymore, but I tell people to balance their lives or flow back and forth as best you can. And I'm the one that doesn't do it. So it's tough. Keep the big picture in sight. Keep your head above the fray. Define reality. Keep everything in focus. Be a lifelong learner and fill your cup with discipline. That's a Peter Drucker quote, not mine. Okay, I'm going to whip through these real quick. Changing adversity into opportunity. How do you do that? First thing is, don't panic. If you're going to panic, resolve it quickly by going to Walmart and buying a lot of toilet paper. That's how you resolve panic, apparently. That's what I hear. You got to have focus. It doesn't have to be a red focus, but stay in tune with the things that are most important. If you're being dragged off course, snap yourself back into the right place. Create a new starting line. This is kind of tough. This is with expectation setting, right? Everything's going fine. You're tracking. You're doing what cities do. You're doing your job. Then a hurricane hits. I'm saying that project you had going, that might need to take a back seat, and you need to redraw a new starting line on that project and all the rest of your projects. For instance, for us is we're zooming right along with the 2020 fiscal year budget. The pandemic hits, revenues going down 37%. Yeah, and we don't know whether we're going to make it through the year. So you don't keep going with the current budget. I know all my sister cities, as well as Port Orange, we stopped doing a lot of stuff. And it wasn't all because of COVID. Because we had people doing other things, it's because we were worried we'd run out of money. So we slowed down a lot of projects. We made a new starting line. Concentration on taking care of our citizens, making sure that our act is together regarding COVID, buy the things we need to buy to protect our citizenry and our staff, and then we'll look at the budget and keep on reassessing it. Create a new starting line. Use urgency as an ally. Don't abuse the privilege, but around the 15th of March, the city of Port Orange declared an emergency. When we declare emergencies, the city manager is able to do a lot of things expeditiously. We never abused the privilege, but I guarantee you we used it as an ally to get the things done that we needed to get done without using 3 or 4 months which is the normal process. We kept our elected officials and citizens advised of what we were doing, but we did it much quicker. Use the urgency as an ally. Some questions to ponder. Can I accurately define reality? I don't know if we can accurately define reality all the time. We try, but sometimes we can't quite get there. This period of unprecedented environment and challenge and change, the question is, can you keep your head above water or above the fray where you can get down to the reality of the event and try to navigate through the things that you know to be true? I hate to keep harping on this current crisis or pandemic, but do we know when there's going to be a vaccine? No. We can't define reality there. We don't know. We've been told by one when it's going to be. We've been told by some others when it's not going to be. I don't know. So I'm in this for the long haul. You got to try to define reality and then let your team and citizens know what you know is reality, and then opine on the things that you don't know is reality, and be very clear. I don't know this to be true. However, this is what we're planning for based on the knowledge I have. The next is, am I helping the team become change agents? Are we just gonna barricade ourselves in, hide in the closet, and wait for this to be over? Or are we gonna go out there and affect change? Are we gonna change people's attitudes about the crisis? Are we gonna change the way we do things so it doesn't happen again? Are we gonna make some changes in our organization that will be everlasting? I had a department director meeting today where we talked about November 1st when all the virtual meeting stuff kind of drops off and we go back to actual meetings, whether people working from home will be called back in. Some of you have a telework policy. We have a draft telework policy, but I bet you that Port Orange's telework, our common procedures will change after this, and we'll be a little more amenable to telework after the after the pandemic's over. And then lastly, or thirdly, does my team know the score? Does your team at the end of the day or the end of the week, do they know the score? Do they know what the wins are? Do they know what the losses are? I don't necessarily always do a good job of it, but I try to let my entire staff, just under 500 people on a good day, I try to let everybody know what our wins are and what our challenges are via a weekly email. It goes out on Friday, and everybody gets a chance Friday, Monday, Tuesday, depending on when they come in for their duty if they're uniformed. Gives them an opportunity to see what the wins are, what the challenges are, and I don't spill any personal beans, but we usually give a shout out or two to somebody that's done a good job, and either by name or by department, and it really gives people an opportunity to know the score. And that's not just during a crisis, folks. I think your team needs to know the score all the time, because if they read Facebook or they look at my my inbox of complaints, they're not going to think, they're going to think that's a score. And you got to tell them the actual score, because people tend to concentrate, people tend to communicate the negative more than the positive, and people seem to concentrate on the negative more than the positive. So you got to know the score, you got to tell them the score so they can actively engage in improving the situation. So I have, I think, one more slide here, and then I'd like to open it up for some questions. Wrapping up, 2 more slides. Wrapping up is how we view things is how we do things. And that is the truth all the time. If you think and view the pandemic, the hurricane as a negative, you will do things in a negative fashion. If you think somebody or something is bad, that somebody or something will be a bad turnout. So positive mental attitude, how you view things, this pandemic. So you can ask my staff. I've told and my sister city managers too. This is something we got to get through. It's not the end of the world. We can do it. I went through H1N1 in Iraq, and we made it through that. It was a little dusty and sandy, but we still made it. And it was not the best way to do it, but we did it. And we did it because we all had positive attitudes and didn't complain all the time about all the things we had to do. Don't be a victim. Nobody did this to us. I'm not even blaming China. The pandemic is a pandemic. I don't care who it got here. I couldn't have prevented it, but I am not going to be a victim. I am not going to be a victim. And I don't think anybody else on the team wants to be a victim either. So you need to go from woe is me to wow is me. Here is an opportunity to come out of the pandemic, maybe not a winner, but better off than you were if you play your cards right. I leave you with 2 quotes. Albert Einstein, who wrote some books that are extremely hard to read, but it's worth it. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. Who better than to say that? I would say Thomas Edison, who tried the experiment for the light bulb 10,000 times before he got it right. Every time he failed, somebody would say, Thomas, you failed again. He goes, no, I didn't. I'm 1 light bulb closer to success. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And my all-time favorite, Christopher Robin. Right? You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. All right, I think that's all I have. I'm going to turn my camera back on, I think. And Bob, I think I noticed not too many people on the chat with questions, but if somebody's got a question, I'm ready and standing by about anything.
Thank you, Jake. Remarkable job. Clear that you did something somewhat unique in that you combined any of the readings that you've done in the past with your vast experience to put this together in a practical, common sense manner. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting watching the board on the side is typically we have attendees who will have a certain number that start the webinar, and then they either stay on the whole webinar or a few of them drop off. In your particular case, the number of attendees actually increased during the webinar.
Well,
So
Bob,
I think that's, did you pay them? Okay, you had that strategically, that's your backup, that's part of your backup, right? Anyways, I thought that was worth noting. But I think that the fact that you're speaking to, in many cases, your colleagues and reaffirming some things that many of them live with, some of them are actually going through battles. Your military background and the analogy you reference, I think, is something that was very applicable today. But like yourself, they have the unique opportunity to actually provide leadership every day. Very, very fortunate to be in a position, if you're a manager, a local government manager, to be able to do that, because you're the only person in your city or county that actually has that position. It's not an easy one, and I know that's why you all are in the profession. But personally, I want to say thank you for what you do every day. I know it's a difficult job. And also, Jake, well, let me just reference the Professional Development Committee, because your name is the one who came up to cover this topic, and that evolved from the Professional Development Committee, and we appreciate they were able to secure you, and appreciate very much the fact that you were willing to take time to prepare this presentation. Like others, you had some personal professional responsibilities, and I know you have one particular personal responsibility you need to deal with, but you made certain that you did this for FCCMA, so we appreciate that. Before I go on, I would like to look, it looks like we have a question. How should an individual with over 10 years of healthcare experience, national project management, and currently pursuing coursework in local government management do when the healthcare best practices do not align with senior leadership? So basically, when best practices don't align with senior leadership, I guess they were looking for some advice from you regarding that.
Yeah, so I think we're all having that problem, right? And that's not just in crisis. If I can expand that a little bit, sometimes senior leadership doesn't agree with science, right? You can explain science till the sun goes down, and senior leadership says, yeah, that's great, we're not doing that. Same thing with the health piece, or in our case currently, the CDC piece, right? We have CDC guidelines, and sometimes your leadership is like, yeah, that's a bunch of BS, and off you go. I think that's a conundrum. And by senior leadership, I think if it's at the city manager level, I would hope you would be in an organization where you can sit down with your department director or your city manager as a city employee and say, look, would you consider this this piece of information. Very seldom do I slap down my 51% vote card, and I always want to hear alternatives, diverse opinions about what I'm doing. I might make the same decision, but I want to be informed. And I think the senior leadership, whoever that is, needs to share with you why the decision is being made contrary to science, be it traffic science, be it smart growth science, be it health science, whatever it is. They owe you that. And if they can't share it with you, it's because it's probably not a valid answer. I'll share, it hasn't happened in Port Orange. Well, it has, but not really COVID related, but when you say, can you share with me why you feel that way? And an elected official doesn't have the heart to say, because I need the votes. And so that's our job, though. That happens all the time. You kind of get a feeling that's why the decision's being made. But our job is to provide the information. In that particular case, their job is to vote what they think is best. So, and we all have biases in our thoughts, whether you think you do or not. We all do. So I hope that helped.
It did, Jake, and I think that if I may just add a quick footnote.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most everything is politicized today.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the scientists don't agree with each other, or they contradict each other. And as someone who has, over the last decade, has spent a lot more time looking at research than I have been in terms of the practical side of things, I see that a lot of the scientists have agendas as human beings, and it becomes a little confusing to folks at times as to what are really facts. We have one other question before we make some concluding remarks here. And that question, Jake, is to you regarding your administration. Is there anything that the pandemic has provided you with a surprise? Anything that you didn't expect that has been a surprise for you as a result of the pandemic? And in your case, it may be a pleasant surprise, but anything that you can think of.
Absolutely. And I hope my Volusia County sister cities are still on board. One of the things that I think is important for the state of Florida and all of us in city and county management is to work together. I think this pandemic has bonded our cities, our 16 cities in Volusia County, more than we were before. I've never, in the 5 years I've been here, we've kind of tried to work together, but this is the first time where no kidding, we really tried to work together, to the point where the city managers would get off a phone call and call their elected officials to go, look, we'd really like to do this. You got it before your phone. So it really, the collaborative, we didn't always get it right, or we didn't always agree, but we all tried like heck to open the roads at the right time, to open the boat ramps at the same time, to close down our parks at the same time, to open our parks at the same time, to allow special events. That part of it has been phenomenal. And I love my fellow city managers. I mean, love them, no kidding. I think that's the greatest thing, to have a bunch of sisters and brothers who are getting along at the family reunion. That's a match made in heaven. So that's a pleasant surprise.
Thanks, Jake. And I can see from the chat box that that's ditto in terms of their feelings to you.
Good.
Before I conclude this, though, there's one thing that sort of touched me through your presentation that I would like to make a personal statement about very quickly. And as you're talking about leadership, we lost two local government leaders here very recently, Mark Durbin, Carl Swing. I had the pleasure of knowing both of them. They were exceptional leaders. They touched thousands of lives, people that many that they don't even know. But I just want to say how grateful that we were for people like them, and the fact that we have in this state so many people who have devoted their lives to other people to do things the right way, the right thing. They get up every morning and do that. Again, it's a unique opportunity if you're a local government manager to be able to do that. Not everybody gets an opportunity to do it. Not everyone could pass a background check to even be selected to do it. And then you have to know something about most everything in order to do it successfully in some of their minds. But I think the information you gave us today, sort of a template, Jake, to help those managers continue to do what they want to do, they've been born to do, it seems in many cases, again, is very much appreciated. And to the loved ones of Mark and Carl, our thoughts are with you and all the best. Anyways, we wanted to make sure we acknowledge them. And Jake, thank you again.
You bet.
Anything else from the group before we close?
I just, for all of you that are on or off, but will watch this, if you have any questions, if you want to delve deeper, we had an hour. This is, I usually give this presentation about an hour and a half. So reach out to me at mjohansson@port-orange.org. I'll gladly elaborate or get a phone call or a Zoom call and work through it. I'm going to be kind of busy in October, but if you don't hear from me, I'll be back in November. All right.
Thanks again, Jake. And if you don't mind, those who are on the line, as soon as I adjourn here, which is going to be momentarily, please take a moment to complete the brief evaluation that FCCMA has provided to give them feedback on this webinar. Again, thank you all for attending. Jake, thanks again.
You bet.